Dr. Bob is the world's leading authority on employee recognition, motivation, and engagement. He is president of Nelson Motivation Incorporated, a management training and consulting company specializing in helping organizations improve management practices, programs, and systems. Dr. Bob is much sought after keynote speaker, consultant, executive coach, and I'm thrilled to have him here for a conversation today. So, Dr. Bob,
Karl, thanks for having me.
What's cooking? What's been new?
Well, what's new? The pandemic is ending. Yes.
Let us hope.
Yes, and I have a new book out that's I think might coincide with that. It's called Work Made Fun Gets Done, and it's if you've been pent up and isolated and frustrated and from the pandemic, it's time to branch out and have a little bit more fun. And what better place to do that than with your job? So it's how to make that happen individually, in a group, and in your organization. We've got over 400 real life examples from companies that are pushing in that direction, that are good at this and reap the benefits. In fact, the Fortune's Best Places to Work list is where we kind of started some of our research. We found that the number one most differentiating factor between companies that make that list and companies that do not is employees saying, I work in a fun place. So 82% of the 100 best places to work in America, employees say that, whereas those that didn't make the list, it's somewhere in the 60s. Right. Largest single differential of any variable they look at. So if you want to be successful, want to be the best, you got to make this a part of the work culture and the practices of the organization and each manager in it.
If I can be fanboy for a minute and also age us both, my very first management job was with a little company called Xerox here in San Diego. I worked at Xerox Business Services in 1994, and they gave us all a yearly budget, a recognition budget to be able to spend on your direct reports, and it was like maybe $20 a person or something like that. And I was like, oh, how am I going to do that? Yeah. And when you had a problem in those days, if you didn't go to Dad, you went to the bookstore, not YouTube, right? So I went to Borders. And I have in my hot little hands here the 1001 Ways to Reward Employees, first printing, 1994.
I might need to buy that back from you. I've got one copy of the original. It's now in the 64th printing. It sold about 2 million copies. So that was probably out the first 5,000.
I was going to say this is while you were working on your doctorate, it says in the end notes, which was fun. But this really laid the foundation for me with recognition, because partly I early on equated recognition with paying people, but your book in particular, and then of course Ken Blanchard and others really got me looking at and thinking about, like, no, it's not that. It's the recognition part, not the reward part.
Yeah, you got to pay people fairly and competitively, but you got to do more than just pay them.
That's right, because then we get into whole how engaged are they and all that, and that's where I learned in terms of like asking them, like, what would you like? And so I sat down with all my direct reports, and I've done this ever since, where it's like, okay, we're going to have some good times and bad times over the next year, probably. When we have good times, how would you like to be recognized? Because you talk about fun, and I'd love us to talk more about that, but different people like different things, right?
Absolutely.
So we had like quarterly recognition meetings and things like that, and there were some people who loved being in front of people and getting the piece of paper saying you were great this quarter, and the applause and pizza afterwards. And others wanted to be left alone and just like, just a pat on the back is fine.
No, it didn't mean they didn't want to feel valued. They just didn't want to hug people and have balloons. They wanted to felt that people noticed the work they did and appreciated them for that. So, I'm married to a computer scientist, and I got to tell you, she works her butt off, and she notices when when she's really made something happen, and then no one came back from management. And how did use my stuff in the meeting with the client? What did they say? Oh yeah, they liked it.
They like that. Yeah.
Well, thanks for letting me know. I spent 3 weeks on that through the weekends and whatnot. But so it kind of leaves a mark when you don't do it, and
Right.
and you really need to do it. And you said you're talking about good times and bad times. It's maybe especially important to do it during the bad times, because in good times, it's go and we're things are great, and we all know it's working well, and we're paying people better, hopefully, and celebrations. But the bad times, when things are tight, when tough, maybe even more so, you need to call out performance, because that's what's going to help us get us through the bad time.
Exactly. Yeah.
I worked with FedEx right after 9/11, and they were determined not to fire anyone.
Mhm.
They were very crunched, and so they didn't. But to make that happen, they had to cut everything that was non-essential, and all their recognition programs got cut. And I said, you know what, you kind of threw the baby out with the bath here.
Right.
That it's you could still have the same discussion, and say in a different time we would have had a bonus go with this, and hopefully they'll come back because of the events, that the work that you're doing, and give it the context. People can handle the truth, but you still have to notice when they've done a good job.
Yeah. What do you think has, if anything, has changed in 64 printings, or even in the last 18 months, if there's been any big change in the way that people are looking for recognition, or is it more important, less important? Things haven't really changed that much, and it's just people aren't doing it? Like, is anything different, or what needs to be different? Let me ask it that way.
Well, it's still important, and I would even venture to say more important, because we've all been influenced by technology. Here we're on a Zoom call right now, and so one of the downsides of technology, it maybe can make us more efficient, but it diminishes the personal contact. And so I've a lot of companies now have recognition platforms with ways they can email employees, can email anyone else that's helped them, the company, even their boss, and upper management can email employees, and peer-to-peer and whatnot, and that's great. But I've had a lot of employees say, my boss used to come stick his head in my office and say, hey, that was a great presentation you did. Now I get an email and maybe some points on it, and it's not the same thing. So that people want the visibility, and they want the personal connection. So we've got to be careful that we haven't lost that in the move towards being more efficient with technology. And then on that regard, I think that is, using technology is another big thing. That there's a lot of companies that provide a software. It could be an add-on, a plug-in to Workday or whatever you're currently using, that can allow a system to enable more broader communication for individuals and for groups, and to publicize it through a public news feed, and then, very important, to capture it.
Right.
Peter Drucker used to say, if you're not measuring it, if you can't measure it or don't measure it, then you can't manage it. And so if you want recognition to be a real part of your culture, which is getting stronger, each year, you've got to have a way to measure and track it, to see if we're getting better. It can't just be random. It can't be, well, let's pass out some Starbucks cards and we're done, or let's do one thing, a quarter, at the end of the year. That's the traditional. Let's do something at the end of the year, and then for people's birthdays and maybe years of service. And wow, well, all out of the 1940s, just do it today, when you see something, say something,
Right.
and or catch someone in the hallway, or send them an email, or leave them a voicemail, or mention it to the management team, or and on and on. And what I found, what's been a pure delight, is that the most meaningful forms of recognition don't have much of any cost. So there's really no reason not to do it. So
Right.
a simple thank you, personally, electronically, publicly, in writing, a note, as a starting point. But then it could be, asking people for their ideas and opinions. That's a big motivator. 92% of employees said they'd like to have more of that, and 89% said they'd like to be involved in decisions, especially those ones that affect them in the job they're currently doing.
Right.
And by the way, they're probably closer to that job and can give you better insight if you ask them, even if you have to make the final decision. It'll be a better decision and be more quickly implemented if you get their buy-in and input. And if they make a mistake, and everyone makes mistakes, how you handle that is huge, because you can be the smartest person in the room and call them out and criticize them and embarrass them in front of their peers. But you can also, take a breath and a step back and say, no, I'm not sure I would have done it the same way, but what'd you learn from that? And show a higher calling and a longer term view of the relationship that's going to serve you for time to come. Bill Gates at Microsoft, one of his favorite quotes that I like is he said, you can tell a lot about the long-term viability of any organization simply by looking at how they handle mistakes. Because if you embarrass people, they'll never make that mistake again, but they start spending more time making sure you don't see the mistakes and playing defense and sending emails to make sure they're not blamed if it goes down wrong,
Right. Right.
Or you can have them be more forthright and say, yeah, I made this mistake. Here's why it won't happen again. And let's talk about the staff meeting so other people can learn from the mistake. Boy, that's a whole different ball game to make that a healthy part of us working together. And if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not stretching things to improve enough.
Right.
We're just locked into what we've done for the last 5 years,
Yeah. In your book, Work Made Fun Gets Done, you've got a chapter on virtual work, and to a certain extent, remote work falls into that as well. Is there, well, I have two questions, but let me not combine them. Let me ask them one at a time. So what is there anything, is there any kind of better recognition in a virtual or remote world that's easier to do virtually or remotely?
Well, yeah, you've got to use the communication vehicle you got. So yes, you need to recognize people virtually. And a lot of people say, well, I can't, what could you do? Well, here's a simple one that is very powerful. I actually got this, we both live in San Diego. I got this from a manager that works for the city. He said that they have, periodically they do a praise barrage when they in their meetings. Now you can do this face to face, but you can also do it on Zoom. Because, hey, before we get started on the agenda today, let me just take a few minutes and go around the group, and as I call someone's name, I'd like other people to speak up and say what you most value about working with that person. Let's start with John. How about Mary? And 10 minutes later, what do you have? You have people that have heard real life feedback on how they're perceived by their coworkers and what they do well, 100% positive. And I guarantee you, whatever they heard, two things are going to happen. One, they're going to have more pride and their energy is going to rise. And number two, whatever they've been called out for, they're going to do more of, because what you recognize gets repeated. And so, and things that people are good at, they can become great at if you give them a chance to give them that feedback.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, particularly with, maybe it's not just first-time managers, but a lot of managers will spend a lot of time thinking about the employees or what they've done, and they're really grateful that these things happen. They might even drift off to sleep thinking about all the great stuff that the employee did, and they never tell them.
Exactly.
It's all in their head.
Ken Blanchard, who I worked with for 10 years, used to say, good thoughts not delivered mean squat. And so mentally to say, oh, Sally did it again, she's one of my best employees, isn't going to mean much to Sally if you never say something or call it out or mention her to the management team or praise her in front of the work group, or or any of the other thousands of things that you can do. And as you indicated, that could be even more efficient if you take a few minutes to ask Sally how she likes to be recognized, when she first starts. And some companies, I'm proud to say, they will, when someone comes on board, like Wyndham Hotels, for example, when someone it starts on board, they're filling out their benefit sheets and whatnot, and then they have a page, seems like random questions on recognition preferences. And
Right.
so what's your favorite flower, your favorite food? What do you have any pets? What are their names? And that page goes to whoever's managing them in that company. And that's just a smart, practical thing to do. And then the focus becomes, hey, if someone helped you out, check out their preferences. Sometimes some companies keep that at the front desk, that you can.
Right.
And then to remind employees every now and then to update your preferences.
Right.
And now it's a whole different thing. We're enabling it to happen more than and not just putting it on managers, that everyone's able to do this. If someone did you a favor, thank them, and they're likely to be there next time you need a favor.
Right.
It's just common sense, but hasn't always been common practice. And
No.
as we get busier, we tend to leave behind some of these. Voltaire in the 17th century said that common sense isn't very common. And darn, I think this is one of those things where it's carried through today. That what could be simpler than to value your best workers, or people that have helped you, but it gets lost in the shuffle, and we get, managers get busy and they're doing their own work, and well, if you're managing others, on top of the list has got to be what you're doing for the people that work for you. And again, Peter Drucker said, define management as getting the work done through others, not being a super worker, not trying to do it all yourself, but helping your people get the work done. So that's got to lead with a question: how's it going? How can I help you? Because your job is to get, if they're able to do their job well, it's going to reflect on the results you want as well. It's going to make you look good. It's not going to be, the worst is having a manager that, takes credit for everything their team does and steals their ideas. And, that's right. People want to get away from working with a person like that.
That's right. Yeah. A lot of what you're talking about really deals with the culture of the organization. And if you've got a culture that's very amenable to all of that, it can sometimes make it easy, right? But I know the answer to this, but I'd like your take on it. Like, what do you do if you're say an aspiring leader or a new leader in a culture that like, we don't have time for that, or it's busy, or like, hey, it's my job, I don't expect to be recognized for that, I don't need a parade every time I do something.
Or your manager says, don't waste your time on that. I've worked with companies where that happens. It says, well, in your sphere of influence, you can still do it. You can still be considerate. You can still be thoughtful. You can still take time. If talking to your employees and getting to know them better and isn't part of management, I don't know what is.
Right.
Because otherwise, we don't need the people. Just good luck, do it all on your own. But again, it's the people are the extension of the manager, and it's a smart manager that realizes that leveraging and helping them is gonna help themselves. And so, ideally, you can make that happen and lead with the results. I've worked with several companies. I was speaking in Seattle a number of years ago and speaking to 800 people, and this person looked really familiar in the front row. I said, have I met you? I go, yeah, I heard you speak 6 weeks ago. I had to come tell you what happened. Yeah, well, what happened? And she goes, I left your session saying, this is real. I'm going to do it. I'm not asking anyone for permission. I'm just going to do it in my department. And she did. And I go, well, like, what did you do? She goes, well, we created a happiness committee. It has 5 people on it. No one knew who any of them were. It was anonymous. But any one of those 5 people could say, hey, it's time to do something. Morale is low, or we just got a new client, whatever. And I said, well, what types of things would you do? Well, we did a picnic up on the roof in our high rise down in downtown Seattle, and we bartered meeting space with the company on the next block over that was a limo company, and they gave us limo rides for letting them use our meeting space once a month, and just kind of creative kind of ideas like that. And she said the results was explosive. It had an immediate buzz with her department, and so much so that other managers noticed and said, "Hey, what are you doing over there? Your people are all pumped up. Well, come to the next meeting. We're not hiding anything." And it just got better and better. And this is how you change a culture, one step at a time. And fast forward about 18 months later, that company, Perkins Coie, a law firm of all places, entered the best places to work in America, number 23 on the list, which I would say from one person, a manager in the finance department, saying, "This is real. I'm going to make it happen." That's right. And leading, and then showing what it meant for not just morale, but productivity, and for teamwork, and for creativity and innovation, and for retention. If you create a culture of recognition, research from Merritt's in St. Louis found that in a culture of recognition, people are 5 times more likely to feel valued. Makes sense. They're 6 times more likely to say they work at a great place, to refer other people to it. They're 7 times more likely to keep working for the company, as ideally for the rest of their career. Well, that's the price of admission right there, because right now we're in a very tight labor market, and everyone you can hold on to, that's one less person you have to hire, right? so to have a 7 times factor of keeping people, because why would you leave? They appreciate me here, and they encourage me to do the things that I want to work on as well, that help the organization and fine tune my own skills. Why would you go anywhere else? And it's a seductive and a very powerful thing. I worked with a company in Connecticut, Boardroom Inc. And just I mentioned, like, asking people for their ideas and suggestions. They started a thing called iPower, where they asked all employees to turn in 2 ideas every week on how we could save money or better serve the customer or streamline the process. And it took them a little bit to get it going, but once it was up and running, they got thousands of ideas. They didn't implement all of them, right, but they implemented enough of them to make a huge difference. They increased their revenues 5-fold in 3 years. They said, just because of this program, where they'd ask people for their ideas, and they wouldn't get a committee to review them and dump on all of them, say, what gives you the right to tell us what we should be doing in purchasing? Right. It'll never happen again. They had other average employees. They took turns reviewing the ideas, and they said, we're trying to encourage ideas here, so make sure that's the lead. So they go, this is a great idea. You should really do it. And they give it back to the person that suggested, let us know if we can help you with your idea. Who's going to have more energy for the idea than the person that came up with it to begin with?
Exactly. And right.
I tell you, it was not only did their revenues increase, they said something else happened. That all our turnover stopped. It used to be like a revolving door, and now there's no reason to leave anymore. They can let you can take your job anywhere you want. They encourage that. Wow, what a great place.
What a concept, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And they call these soft skills, and they're really not. These are essential leadership skills, really.
The soft skills, but they're the harder ones for companies and managers to do. The analytical skills are really, the easier ones, because this calculating, okay, cost benefit ratio, yeah, we should get that equipment, but the soft skills are something. It's more of an art form. You gotta work at it. First, you got to see it, because if you don't see it, then you're kind of blinded and you'll never get going. And so you gotta try it. You might like it. It might work for you. So, and I love having people have that breakthrough where they go, I don't know, that sounds like hooey to me. And well, just try it. And in fact, I probably shouldn't say who it was, but I've worked with 80% of the Fortune 500 at this point, but I was working with the IRS. Think of a kind of a negative work environment. They were very stressed. And I looked at the actual practice they did. They would have supervisors listening on agent calls with the public until they heard them make a mistake, and then they'd write them up, and then they'd go to the next call and do the same thing. I'm going, well, it's great that they're listening in, but instead of focusing on what they did wrong, find something they did well and write that up. They go, well, that's not how we've done it. Yeah, I know. And they did that. It made a huge difference, instead of, wow, now your manager's on your side instead of trying to catch you doing something wrong. And if you got written up a couple times, docked your pay and the next increase. And, so it kind of created a very defensive, hostile work environment when they're already doing a kind of a very stressful job. And so put some joy in their life.
Right. I really liked what you said about first they have to see it. And I think what happens in small businesses or owner operated outfits, things like that, 15, 20, 100 people, somewhere number like that. They just started and it grew and they never knew any other way. And so if
yes or no, said that sometimes that's great if they did, but sometimes I find small businesses say, well, we don't have the money to focus on better motivation, because they're automatically assuming that means a big party or more benefits or raises, and start where you're at. And
that's right.
And focus on daily visibility with leadership, flexibility. You're not confined by a 300-page policy manual. You can be spontaneous. There's a lot you got going if you start there instead of what you can't do. I've found over in working with so many companies that most companies for some reason tend to start with what they can't do. Well, we can't do that.
Right. Right.
What if you could?
Well, and there are lots of resources out there, and many of them are provided by you. So where could people find out more about you, Dr. Bob, and get your book and all of that?
Well, the new book and this is actually my 31st book. How about that? So Work Made Fun Gets Done is wherever books are sold. I also have all my books for sale on my website at discounted prices. And that's www.drbobnelson.com, DRBOBNELSON.com. And we have an online bookstore. And like I said, they're all available at discounted prices and in bulk pricing, that type of thing.
Fantastic. Well, I hope people check you out some more and continue. You've been providing me lots of resources throughout the years, and so I appreciate it very much.
Well, you've got a book that's 25 years old. Then I'm gonna have to send you some of the more recent ones, so you can have a full stable there of Dr. Bob Library. We didn't get a chance to talk about your latest book.
Oh, well,
real quick, what is that?
That's okay. So it's called Welcome to Leadership, and what it is, it's an adaptation from Lincoln C. Andrews' book. It's called Manpower, that he wrote in 1920. He was a brigadier general, and the intent was to bring men up to speed into leadership roles after World War I and after a pandemic and after some assaults to democracy, to get them ready for industry. And as I was reading through the book, I was like, this is what's old is new again, right?
Yes, that's great.
So there were a lot of parts. Partly reading it was like listening to my grandfather whispering in my ear a little bit. But
how cool is that?
Language I felt needed to be cleaned up and certainly more inclusive. And but there were a lot of things that, there's wisdom that's 100 years old there that can be brushed off a little bit, and I think we've forgotten some of it. And so, and he
proven the test of time.
That's right. And so, I mean, he talks a good amount of just, giving people a pat on the back, making sure, it doesn't hurt if other people hear you telling them what a great job they did, having people, share each other's workload if they can,
victories.
As long as they're not possessive about their equipment or their machine. Sometimes it's like, oh, don't touch my stuff, and how to lead that. And so it's really focused around new leadership and some of the challenges you're going to have as a new leader, and just be authentic and be yourself and get better at being yourself is
very good.
Just
I'm from a military family. My father was a career Air Force commander, and it was funny. I was born when he was actually flying, and he flew everything the Air Force had, and B-52s and whatnot. And when he got back at the squadron meeting, they did a thing for if you had a birth in your family, they gave you a little silver cup, and they, Colonel Nelson, here's your cup for your new kid. And they had a visiting general at that meeting, and he said, he got up and he came up in front of this like 800 people. He said, no, that's not how you do. This is an important thing, and he modeled a better form of recognition.
Oh,
And
that's
he
terrific.
said, Colonel Nelson, we're called, as in serving our country, we're often called away from our family at critical times. And in this case, your son was born while you're gone, and it's a terrible sacrifice, that we want to know that we're with you now, and we hope you're the best for your family, and just put a whole different spin on this little tin silver cup, and
Right.
so I don't know, maybe that's the seeds of how I got into this. Maybe I heard that, but
Yeah.
it's it was Napoleon that once said he learned the most amazing thing: men will die for ribbons. It's recognition's got some pretty powerful stuff to it.
It really does. And we've got to continue to highlight those who are doing it correctly, or doing it well, or even trying. Yeah. So, well, thank you. I appreciate the conversation. And
Likewise, Carl, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's probably overdue since we both live in the same city, but
yeah.